The morning sun cast long shadows across downtown Chicago, painting the concrete jungle in hues of gold and amber. Marcus Thompson, 17 years old, walked with purpose down Michigan Avenue, his worn backpack slung over one shoulder. His sneakers, though clean, showed the telltale signs of careful maintenance rather than recent purchase. He had polished them himself that morning, as he did every morning, because his grandmother always said that a man's shoes told his story. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor, mixing with the exhaust fumes of passing taxis. Marcus checked his phone. 7:45. He had exactly 15 minutes to reach the Harrison building for his internship interview at Whitmore Financial Group. This was his chance, the opportunity his guidance counselor had fought to get him. As he approached the gleaming glass tower, Marcus noticed a black limousine pulling up to the curb. The door swung open, and out stepped a man in his early 50s, silver hair perfectly coiffed, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus's family's monthly rent. Behind him emerged a younger man, perhaps in his 30s, carrying a leather briefcase and nodding attentively at everything the older man said. Marcus moved to step around them, but the older man stopped directly in his path, looking down at his Italian leather shoes with a frown. A small smudge of dirt marred the otherwise pristine surface. "You there," the man said, his voice carrying the casual authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Boy." Marcus stopped, his jaw tightening slightly. "Yes, sir?" The man gestured at his shoes with a dismissive wave. "Clean my shoes." Marcus blinked, certain he had misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Clean my shoes, boy." There's a smudge. The man's eyes traveled over Marcus's modest clothing, his worn backpack, his carefully maintained but clearly not expensive sneakers. "I'll give you $5. That's probably more than you'd make in an hour doing whatever it is you people do." The younger man beside him shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Whitmore, perhaps we should just—" "Quiet, Daniel." Richard Whitmore III didn't take his eyes off Marcus. "Well, I don't have all day. Some of us have important meetings." Marcus felt his face grow hot. He thought of his grandmother, who had worked as a housekeeper for 40 years, who had scrubbed floors and cleaned toilets so that he could have a chance at something better. He thought of his mother, working double shifts at the hospital, coming home with swollen feet and tired eyes but never complaining. He thought of all the times he had been told that if he just worked hard enough, if he just kept his head down and played by the rules, he would succeed. "I'm not going to clean your shoes, sir," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the anger burning in his chest. "I'm on my way to a job interview." Whitmore laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "A job interview? You?" He turned to Daniel with an amused expression. "Did you hear that? The street kid has a job interview." "I'm not a street kid," Marcus said, his hands clenching at his sides. "I'm a senior at Lincoln Park High School. I have a 3.9 GPA, and I've been accepted to Northwestern's business program. I'm here to interview for the summer internship at Whitmore Financial Group." The smile faded from Richard Whitmore's face. "You're interviewing at my company?" "Yes, sir, I am." For a long moment, Whitmore simply stared at him. Then his expression hardened into something cold and dismissive. "Well, that interview just ended. Consider yourself rejected." He brushed past Marcus, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Daniel, make sure security knows not to let this one in. And call Ms. Patterson. Tell her to be more careful about who she lets through the screening process. We have standards." Daniel hesitated, giving Marcus an apologetic look before hurrying after his boss. Marcus stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching them disappear through the revolving glass doors. Around him, the city continued its relentless pace, indifferent to the small tragedy that had just unfolded. A woman in a business suit stepped around him impatiently. A delivery truck honked at a taxi. The chestnut vendor called out his prices. Marcus felt something shift inside him, a cold determination settling into his bones like ice. He pulled out his phone and typed a note to himself, his fingers trembling slightly, but his mind perfectly clear. Richard Whitmore III. Whitmore Financial Group, remember this day. He turned and walked away from the Harrison building, his stride steady and purposeful. He didn't look back. The basement of the Thompson family home smelled of his grandmother's lavender sachets and old books. Marcus sat at the wooden desk that had once belonged to his grandfather, a man he had never met, but whose presence seemed to fill the room. The desk was scarred with the marks of decades of use, and Marcus liked to imagine all the important documents that had been signed here, all the letters written, all the dreams planned. His grandmother, Eleanor Thompson, appeared at the bottom of the stairs with a cup of tea and a plate of her famous oatmeal cookies. At 73, she moved more slowly than she once had, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "You've been down here for 3 hours, baby," she said, setting the tea and cookies beside him. "What are you working on?" Marcus looked up from his laptop, his eyes red from concentration. "Research, Grandma. I'm learning everything I can about the stock market, about hedge funds, about how money really works in this country." Eleanor settled into the worn armchair in the corner, the one she had sat in while helping Marcus with his homework since he was 6 years old. "This is about what happened today, isn't it, at that interview?" Marcus had told her everything, of course. He told her everything. She was the only person in the world he trusted completely. "That man looked at me and saw nothing, Grandma. He saw my skin, my clothes, and he decided I was nothing, that I was worth less than the dirt on his shoes." "And what did you decide?" Eleanor asked, her voice gentle but probing. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I decided that one day I'm going to own everything he has. His company, his building, maybe even those expensive shoes. And when I do, I'm going to remember exactly how he made me feel today. Not for revenge, for proof." "Proof of what, baby?" "That he was wrong, that every person who ever looked at someone like me and saw less than human was wrong." Eleanor reached over and took his hand. Her skin was paper-thin now, marked with age spots, but her grip was still strong. "Your grandfather came to this country from Jamaica with $8 in his pocket. He couldn't read English. He worked on the docks, in the factories, anywhere that would have him. And he saved every penny until he could buy this house. It took him 22 years. Marcus had heard this story many times, but he never tired of it. He used to say that the only thing a man truly owns is his integrity. Everything else can be taken from you. Money, property, even your freedom. But your integrity, that you give away yourself, and once it's gone forever." "What are you saying, Grandma?" Eleanor smiled, her eyes crinkling with wisdom earned through decades of hardship and triumph. "I'm saying that there's nothing wrong with ambition, nothing wrong with wanting to prove yourself. But don't let that man's ugliness become your ugliness. Don't let his hate become your hate. You become successful, you earn your fortune, but you do it the right way. You do it so that when you look in the mirror, you see a man your grandfather would be proud of." Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. He blinked them away. "I will, Grandma. I promise." "Good." She stood up, patting his shoulder. "Now eat those cookies before they get cold. And remember, baby, the best revenge isn't becoming like them. The best revenge is showing them a better way to be." After she left, Marcus turned back to his laptop. He opened a new document and began to type. 5-year plan, from nothing to something. The words flowed from his fingers like water, each one a brick in the foundation of the empire he would build. Northwestern University's campus sprawled along the shores of Lake Michigan, its Gothic architecture a testament to the weight of academic tradition. Marcus arrived on a scholarship that covered tuition but little else. He worked 3 jobs his freshman year, tutoring, delivering food, and cleaning the chemistry labs late at night. His roommate, Tyler Chen, came from a wealthy family in San Francisco. He drove a BMW, wore designer clothes, and initially looked at Marcus with the same dismissive curiosity that Marcus had grown accustomed to receiving from the privileged. But Tyler, unlike Richard Whitmore, had the capacity to see beyond his own assumptions. It happened 3 weeks into the semester. Tyler had been struggling with his economics homework, growing increasingly frustrated as the concepts refused to click into place. Marcus, returning from his late-night lab cleaning shift at 2 in the morning, found Tyler surrounded by crumpled paper and empty energy drink cans. "Hey man, you okay?" Marcus asked, setting down his bucket of cleaning supplies. Tyler looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "I have an econ midterm tomorrow, and I don't understand any of this. My dad's going to kill me if I fail another class." Marcus hesitated. He was exhausted, and he had his own classes to worry about. But something in Tyler's defeated expression reminded him of himself, of all the times he had felt overwhelmed and alone. "Let me take a look," Marcus said, pulling up a chair. For the next 4 hours, Marcus explained supply and demand curves, walked through elasticity calculations, and demonstrated how to interpret market equilibrium models. He used examples from his own research, from the hours he had spent in his grandmother's basement, teaching himself the language of finance. By dawn, Tyler was nodding along, understanding forming in his eyes for the first time. "Holy crap," Tyler said, leaning back in his chair. "You actually made it make sense. How do you know all this stuff? You're not even an econ major." "I'm going to be," Marcus said. "I'm double majoring in economics and computer science." "Why?" Marcus thought about Richard Whitmore, about the smudge on his expensive shoes, about the casual cruelty in his voice. "Because I want to understand how money works, really works, and I want to use technology to do things with it that nobody's ever done before." Tyler studied him for a long moment. "You're different, you know that? I mean, I thought I knew who you were when you moved in. I made assumptions." He looked down, shame coloring his cheeks. "I was wrong." "Most people are," Marcus said, not unkindly. "The question is what you do about it." Tyler stuck out his hand. "I'm Tyler Chen. I don't think we've actually been properly introduced." Marcus shook it. "Marcus Thompson. Nice to meet you." From that night forward, they were friends. Real friends. Tyler introduced Marcus to his network, to the sons and daughters of tech entrepreneurs and venture capitalists who summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen. Marcus introduced Tyler to his world, to the Southside community centers where he volunteered, to his grandmother's Sunday dinners, to the reality of life for people who didn't have trust funds to fall back on. It was Tyler who first suggested that Marcus attend the annual Chicago Finance Summit, a gathering of the city's most powerful financial minds. "My dad's a sponsor," Tyler explained. "I can get you in as his guest." Marcus almost said no. The tickets cost $5,000, and he couldn't afford to feel like a charity case. But then Tyler added something that changed his mind. "Richard Whitmore is giving the keynote speech. I figured you might want to see him." Marcus felt that cold determination stir in his chest, the ice that had formed there on a crisp autumn morning 3 years ago. "Yeah," he said, "I want to see him." The Chicago Finance Summit was held in the grand ballroom of the Hilton, a vast space dripping with crystal chandeliers and old money. Marcus wore a suit he had purchased from a thrift store and tailored himself, watching YouTube videos until he could make the alterations look professional. Tyler had offered to buy him something new, but Marcus refused. "When I walk into that room," he had explained, "I want to know that everything I'm wearing, I earned myself." Tyler had nodded, understanding in a way that surprised them both. The ballroom was filled with men and women who controlled billions of dollars. They spoke in hushed tones about acquisitions and mergers, about market trends and political favors. Marcus moved among them like a ghost, listening, observing, filing away every piece of information. And then he saw him. Richard Whitmore III stood near the bar, surrounded by admirers and sycophants, laughing at something one of them had said. He looked exactly the same as he had 3 years ago, perhaps a bit more silver in his hair, but that same casual arrogance in his posture, that same dismissive curl to his lip. Marcus felt his hands trembling. He clenched them into fists, remembering his grandmother's words, "Don't let his ugliness become your ugliness." "You okay?" Tyler asked, appearing at his elbow. "Yeah, I'm okay." "He doesn't recognize you, you know. Men like that, they don't remember the people they step on." "I know," Marcus said, "but I remember him." The keynote speech was everything Marcus had expected. Whitmore spoke about the importance of tradition, of maintaining the established order, of trusting in the wisdom of those who had come before. He made jokes about young upstarts trying to disrupt the market, about the foolishness of thinking that technology could replace human judgment. The audience laughed and applauded, and Marcus sat in silence, his mind racing. After the speech, during the networking hour, Marcus found himself face to face with an older woman with sharp eyes and a kind smile. Her name tag read, Dr. Patricia Howard, Howard Capital Partners. "You look like you're thinking very hard about something," she said. "I'm thinking about disruption," Marcus replied, "about how the people in this room are so convinced that the future will look like the past that they can't see what's coming." Dr. Howard raised an eyebrow. "And what's coming?" "Algorithmic trading, machine learning, democratization of financial information. In 10 years, half the firms in this room will be obsolete, and they don't even know it." The older woman studied him for a long moment. "What's your name?" "Marcus Thompson, ma'am." "And what do you do, Marcus Thompson?" "I'm a junior at Northwestern, double major in economics and computer science." Dr. Howard reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "Call my office on Monday. I think we should talk." Marcus looked at the card. Howard Capital Partners was one of the most respected investment firms in the Midwest. Dr. Patricia Howard was a legend, one of the first black women to run her own hedge fund, a pioneer who had broken barriers that Marcus couldn't even imagine. "Thank you, Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I will." That Monday, Marcus called, and his life changed forever. The offices of Howard Capital Partners occupied the top 3 floors of a building on Wacker Drive, overlooking the Chicago River. Marcus had expected the sterile, cold environment of traditional finance, but instead found warm wood paneling, vibrant art on the walls, and employees who smiled when they passed each other in the hallways. Dr. Howard met him in her corner office, a space filled with books, awards, and photographs of her, with everyone from presidents to Nobel laureates. "Sit down, Marcus," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "Tell me about yourself." So he did. He told her about his grandmother, about his mother, about growing up on the South Side. He told her about that morning outside the Harrison building, about Richard Whitmore's shoes, about the cold determination that had settled into his bones. He told her about his 5-year plan, about his dream of creating an investment platform that would democratize wealth building for communities like his own. Dr. Howard listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know why I started this firm?" she asked. "No, ma'am. 30 years ago, I was the only black woman in my MBA program at Harvard. My classmates would have study groups, networking events, job interview prep sessions. I was never invited. Not once. So I studied alone, networked alone, prepared alone. And when I graduated, do you know how many job offers I received? Marcus shook his head. Zero. Not one firm in Boston or New York would hire me. They said I wasn't a good fit, that I didn't have the right connections, that their clients wouldn't be comfortable. She smiled, but there was steel beneath it. So I went back to Chicago and started my own firm. With $5,000 I had saved from working summers and a lot of favors from people who believed in me. And now you're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Money isn't the point, Marcus. It never was. The point is proving that the people who tried to keep me out were wrong. The point is creating opportunities for people who look like us, who come from where we come from. The point is changing the system from the inside. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. I'm going to offer you an internship, not because I feel sorry for you, or because I want to check a diversity box, because I see something in you that I see in myself. That hunger, that determination, that refusal to accept what others say you're worth. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I don't know what to say. Say yes. And then work harder than you've ever worked in your life. Because I don't give second chances, Marcus. You get one shot. Make it count. Yes, Marcus said. Yes, ma'am. I will. The internship was brutal. Marcus worked 16-hour days, learning everything from quantitative analysis to client relations. He shadowed senior analysts, attended board meetings, and absorbed information like a sponge. Dr. Howard pushed him relentlessly, criticizing his reports, challenging his assumptions, forcing him to defend every decision. But she also taught him. She taught him how to read a balance sheet, how to spot market trends, how to understand the psychology of investors. She taught him how to walk into a room full of people who expected him to fail and make them believe he would succeed. She taught him how to use his background as a strength rather than a weakness, how to connect with clients who were tired of dealing with out-of-touch Wall Street types. And she taught him about Richard Whitmore. He's overextended, Doctor. Howard said one evening, as they reviewed financial statements in her office, Whitmore Financial has been losing clients for years. He's tried to compensate by making increasingly risky investments, but it's not working. The company is bleeding money. How do you know this? Marcus asked. Because I've been watching him for a long time. Men like Whitmore, they think they're untouchable. They think their name and their connections will protect them forever. But the market doesn't care about names. The market only cares about performance. Marcus looked at the numbers on the screen. If Whitmore Financial keeps losing money at this rate, they'll be bankrupt within 5 years. Probably sooner. He's been trying to find a buyer, but no one wants to touch it. Too much liability, too many bad investments. Dr. Howard turned to face him. Why are you so interested in Whitmore? Marcus told her about the shoes, about the interview, about the casual racism that had changed the trajectory of his life. Dr. Howard was quiet for a moment. Do you want revenge? I don't know, Marcus admitted. Part of me does. Part of me wants to see him lose everything, the way he tried to take everything from me. But another part of me knows that's not enough. Revenge is too small. I want to build something bigger than him. Something that proves he was wrong about me, about people like me, about everything. Good, Dr. Howard said. Hold on to that, because the moment you make your success about him, you've already lost. Your success needs to be about you, about what you can create, about the people you can help. Whitmore is just a stepping stone. Don't make him your destination. 2 years later, Marcus graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern. Doctor. Howard offered him a full-time position at Howard Capital, but to everyone's surprise, he declined. I need to build my own thing, he explained. You taught me that. You didn't work for someone else's firm, you created your own. I need to do the same. Dr. Howard nodded, a proud smile on her face. I was wondering when you'd figure that out. What's your plan? Marcus pulled out his laptop and showed her the prototype he had been developing in his spare time. It was a financial planning application designed specifically for low-income communities, using algorithms to provide personalized investment advice at a fraction of the cost of traditional advisors. I'm calling it Elevate, Marcus said. The idea is to give people who've never had access to financial planning the same tools that wealthy people take for granted. No minimums, no hidden fees, no judgment. Dr. Howard studied the prototype carefully. This is impressive. But you'll need funding to scale it. I know. I'm going to raise it. From who? Venture capitalists aren't exactly lining up to invest in financial tools for poor communities. They want the next big tech unicorn, not social impact. Marcus smiled. Then I'll have to change their minds. The first year of Elevate was the hardest of Marcus's life. He worked out of his grandmother's basement again, the same desk, the same scarred wood, the same lavender sachets in the air. He pitched to 47 investors and received 47 rejections. He maxed out 3 credit cards, ate ramen for months, and questioned his sanity on a daily basis. His mother, Denise, worried about him constantly. She would come home from her hospital shifts and find him asleep at his desk, surrounded by coffee cups and financial projections. "Baby, you're going to work yourself to death," she said one night, shaking him awake. "Maybe you should get a regular job, something stable. You could always work on this dream in your spare time." Marcus looked at his mother, at the exhaustion in her eyes, at the toll that decades of caregiving had taken on her body. "Mum, you've worked 2 jobs my entire life so that I could have opportunities you never had. Grandma cleaned houses for 40 years so that you could have opportunities. I can't quit now. I can't let all of that sacrifice mean nothing." Denise sat down beside him, taking his hand. "I'm not asking you to quit. I'm asking you to take care of yourself. You won't change the world if you're dead." "I know, Mom. I know." The breakthrough came 6 months later from an unexpected source. Tyler Chen, who had gone to work for his father's venture capital firm in San Francisco, called Marcus with news that made his heart stop. "I've been telling my dad about Elevate for months," Tyler said. "He finally looked at your pitch deck and he wants to meet you." "Your dad? David Chen? The David Chen?" "The one and only. He's flying to Chicago next week. He wants to see a demo." Marcus's hands were shaking. David Chen was one of the most successful venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, with a portfolio that included 3 unicorns and countless successful exits. Getting his attention was like getting an audience with a king. "Tyler, I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet. My dad is brutal. If your product isn't ready, he'll tear you apart." "It's ready," Marcus said. "It's been ready for a long time." The meeting took place in a private room at a restaurant on the Magnificent Mile. David Chen was a small man with sharp eyes and an intensity that seemed to fill the entire space. He shook Marcus's hand firmly, studying him with the same calculating look that Marcus had seen on Dr. Howard's face years ago. "Tyler says you're the smartest person he's ever met," David said. "That's quite a compliment, considering he went to school with some of the brightest minds in the country." "Tyler's a good friend," Marcus replied, "but I don't need compliments. I need capital. Let me show you what Elevate can do." For the next hour, Marcus demonstrated the platform. He showed the intuitive interface, the sophisticated algorithms that provided personalized advice, the security features that protected user data. He explained the business model, the revenue projections, the path to profitability. But more than that, he told stories. He told David about Mrs. Johnson, the first beta user, a grandmother who had never invested a dime in her life, but was now building a college fund for her grandchildren. He told him about Marcus Williams, a young father who had used Elevate to pay off his debt and start saving for a house. He told him about the community center on the south side, where he had installed a computer kiosk so that anyone could access the platform for free. When he finished, David Chen was silent for a long moment. "How much are you looking for?" he asked. $2 million. That will get us to profitability within 18 months. I'll give you 5, but I want 20% equity and a board seat. Marcus felt the world tilt beneath him. $5 million. You're thinking too small, Marcus. This isn't just a business opportunity. This is a chance to change how an entire generation thinks about money. I want to be part of that. They shook hands, and Marcus had to resist the urge to cry. He thought about his grandmother, about his mother, about all the people who had sacrificed so that he could be here, in this moment, shaking hands with a billionaire who believed in his dream. "There's one more thing," Marcus said. "I want to give 10% of our profits back to community development programs in underserved areas. It's not negotiable." David raised an eyebrow. "That's a lot of money." "I know, but that's the whole point. We're not just trying to make money, we're trying to change lives. If we're successful, everyone should benefit, not just our shareholders." David studied him for a long moment, then smiled. "You're exactly what Tyler said you were. Deal." Elevate launched to the public on a Tuesday morning in March. By Friday, they had 100,000 users. By the end of the month, they had 1 million. By the end of the year, they had 10 million. The press called it the democratization of finance. The New York Times ran a profile on Marcus, calling him the voice of a generation. The Wall Street Journal questioned whether traditional financial advisors were obsolete. CNBC invited him on air to debate skeptics who claimed that algorithms couldn't replace human judgment. Marcus handled it all with the same quiet determination that had carried him through every obstacle. He hired carefully, building a team that shared his vision. He maintained the 10% profit-sharing commitment even when investors pushed back. He spent his weekends volunteering at community centers, teaching financial literacy to kids who reminded him of himself. And through it all, he never forgot about Richard Whitmore. He watched from a distance as Whitmore Financial continued its decline. The company's stock price fell by 60%. 3 major clients withdrew their funds. There were rumors of an SEC investigation into questionable trading practices. Part of Marcus wanted to feel satisfaction, even vindication, but a larger part felt something more complicated, a mixture of pity and determination. Richard Whitmore had tried to diminish him, to reduce him to the dirt on his shoes. Instead, he had become a catalyst, the spark that ignited a fire that would burn long after both of them were gone. The phone call came on a Wednesday afternoon. Marcus was in his office reviewing expansion plans for Elevate's entry into the European market when his assistant buzzed through. "Mr. Thompson, there's a call on line 2. He says his name is Daniel Ashworth, and he claims it's urgent." The name was familiar, but Marcus couldn't place it. "Put him through." "Mr. Thompson, this is Daniel Ashworth. We met briefly about 8 years ago outside the Harrison building. I was with Richard Whitmore." The memory flooded back. The crisp autumn morning, the black limousine, the younger man who had shifted uncomfortably as his boss demanded that Marcus clean his shoes. "I remember you," Marcus said, his voice carefully neutral. "I'm calling because I need your help." "Actually, that's not quite right. I'm calling because Richard Whitmore needs your help, though he'd never admit it." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "You have my attention." Daniel explained the situation. Whitmore Financial was on the verge of collapse. The SEC investigation had uncovered significant irregularities, though nothing criminal. The company's assets were being liquidated, its employees laid off, its legacy dismantled piece by piece. Richard is 72 years old, Daniel said. His health is failing. He's watched everything he built crumble to dust, and he doesn't understand why. He still thinks the world owes him something, that his name should be enough to save him. Why are you telling me this? Because I've followed your career, Mr. Thompson. I've watched what you've built with Elevate, and I remember what Richard did to you that morning. I've thought about it many times over the years. I should have said something. I should have stopped him. I didn't, and I've regretted it ever since. Marcus was quiet for a moment. What exactly are you asking me to do? Whitmore Financial has one valuable asset left, its client list. 15,000 individuals and small businesses who trusted Richard with their money. Most of them are going to lose everything when the company folds. But if someone were to acquire that list, to reach out to those clients and offer them an alternative, they could be saved. And you want me to acquire it. I want you to consider it. The price would be negligible compared to your company's valuation. And it would give you access to a new market segment, older investors who might benefit from Elevate's services. Marcus thought about it. The business case was sound, but that wasn't what made him hesitate. Does Whitmore know you're making this call? No, and if he finds out, he'll probably fire me. But I don't care anymore. I've spent 20 years watching him treat people like they were worthless, like they existed only to serve him. I'm done being part of that. Let me think about it. I'll call you back. Marcus hung up and stared out the window at the Chicago skyline. 8 years ago, he had stood on that sidewalk, humiliated and angry, watching Richard Whitmore disappear through the revolving doors of his empire. Now that empire was falling, and the man who had tried to diminish him was asking for help. He thought about what his grandmother would say. He thought about what Dr. Howard had taught him. He thought about who he wanted to be, not just as a businessman, but as a man. Then he picked up the phone and called Tyler. I need your advice on something, he said. Name it. Marcus explained the situation. When he finished, Tyler was silent for a long moment. Are you seriously considering this? Tyler asked. After what he did to you? I'm considering what's right. There are 15,000 people who are going to lose their savings if no one helps them. It doesn't matter how I feel about Whitmore. Those people are innocent. You're a better person than I am, Marcus. You know that, right? I don't know about that. I just know that I can't let my anger at one man hurt 15,000 others. That's not who I want to be. Tyler sighed. Then do it. Acquire the client list, save those people, and show the world what real leadership looks like. But Marcus, yeah? Make sure you look Whitmore in the eye when you do it. Make sure he sees exactly who you've become. The acquisition was completed 3 weeks later. Elevate purchased Whitmore Financial's client list for $4 million, a fraction of its original value, but more than anyone else was willing to pay. As part of the deal, Marcus personally reached out to every single client, offering them free access to Elevate's platform and personalized assistance in transitioning their accounts. The response was overwhelming. 92% of the clients made the switch. Many of them sent letters of gratitude, expressing relief that someone had cared enough to help them when everything seemed lost. But there was one more thing Marcus needed to do. He arranged a meeting with Richard Whitmore. The old man's office was nothing like Marcus had imagined. He had expected opulence, the trappings of wealth and power. Instead, he found a tired room in a half-empty building, cardboard boxes stacked against the walls, the remnants of a lifetime being packed away. Richard Whitmore sat behind a desk that had once commanded respect. Now it seemed to swallow him, making him look small and fragile. His hair was thinner, his face more lined, his eyes carrying a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. So you're the one who bought my clients, Whitmore said, not getting up. Marcus took a seat across from him. I'm the one who saved your clients. There's a difference. Is this your revenge? Coming here to gloat? No. Marcus looked at the man who had once made him feel worthless. I came here to thank you. Whitmore blinked, clearly surprised. Thank me? For what? 8 years ago, you asked me to clean your shoes. You called me boy. You looked at me and saw nothing worth respecting. Marcus leaned forward. That moment changed my life, not because it hurt me, though it did, because it showed me exactly who I didn't want to become. Whitmore's jaw tightened. Is this some kind of lecture? It's the truth. Every time I wanted to quit, every time I wanted to take shortcuts, every time I was tempted to treat someone the way you treated me, I remembered that morning. And I chose differently. So, in a strange way, you're part of my success story. You showed me the kind of man I refused to be. The old man was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I don't remember it. What? That morning? I don't remember it. You obviously do, every detail, but to me you were just another face in the crowd, another person who didn't matter. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not anger, not vindication, but something closer to sadness. That's the tragedy, isn't it? The moments that define our lives are often meaningless to the people who cause them. Whitmore looked down at his hands. I've spent 50 years building this company. I inherited it from my father, who inherited it from his father. It was supposed to be my legacy, my proof that I mattered. Legacy isn't a company, Marcus said. It's not money or buildings or a name on a door. Legacy is how you treat people. It's the lives you improve. It's the world you leave behind. Then my legacy is nothing. Marcus stood up, preparing to leave, but something made him pause. He thought about his grandmother's words, about not letting ugliness become ugliness. It doesn't have to be, he said. You're still alive, Mr. Whitmore. You can still change the story. The old man looked up, confusion in his eyes. How? I'm starting a financial literacy program for underprivileged youth. Kids like I was, growing up in neighborhoods where no one teaches them about money, where the system seems designed to keep them down. I could use someone with your experience to help design the curriculum. Someone who's made every mistake possible and learned from them. You want me to work for you? I want you to work with me. For free. For as long as it takes to make a difference in the lives of kids who remind you of the one you dismissed 8 years ago. Whitmore stared at him, his expression unreadable. Why would you offer me this? After everything? Because holding on to anger is exhausting, and because I believe people can change, even people like you. There was a long silence. Then slowly, Richard Whitmore nodded. I'll do it, he said. I don't know if I can make up for who I was, but I'll try. Marcus extended his hand. That's all anyone can do. They shook hands, and Marcus felt something release inside him, a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. The ice that had formed in his chest on that autumn morning finally began to thaw. The Elevate Community Center opened its doors on a warm spring morning in the heart of the South Side neighborhood where Marcus had grown up. The building had once been an abandoned warehouse, a symbol of economic decline. Now it gleamed with fresh paint and new windows, a beacon of hope in a community that had been promised much and delivered little. Marcus's grandmother, Eleanor, cut the ribbon. At 81, she moved slowly, but her smile could have powered the entire city grid. She was surrounded by Marcus's mother, by Tyler, by Dr. Howard, by all the people who had believed in Marcus when believing was hard. And standing slightly apart from the crowd, looking uncomfortable but determined, was Richard Whitmore. Over the past year, the old man had become an unlikely ally. He showed up every week to teach classes on financial planning, using his decades of experience to explain concepts in ways that even the youngest students could understand. He didn't sugarcoat his past, didn't pretend to be something he wasn't. He told the kids about his mistakes, about the people he had hurt, about the lessons he had learned too late. And slowly, painfully, he began to change. Marcus watched him now, interacting with a group of teenagers who were learning about compound interest. There was a gentleness in Whitmore's voice that hadn't been there before, a patience that seemed almost foreign to his nature. "You know, Doctor," Howard said, appearing at Marcus's elbow, "I never thought I'd see Richard Whitmore teaching financial literacy to black kids on the South Side." "Neither did I," Marcus admitted, "but people can surprise you." "You surprised a lot of people, Marcus, including me, and I'm not easily surprised." "I learned from the best." Dr. Howard smiled, but her eyes were serious. "What you've built here, it's more than a business. It's more than a community center. It's proof that the system can change. That people who've been told they don't matter can matter more than anyone. That's the hope. It's more than hope. It's reality. You've created something that will outlast all of us, and that, Marcus Thompson, is the real measure of success." After the ceremony, after the speeches and the photographs and the congratulations, Marcus found a quiet moment to visit the room that meant the most to him. The financial literacy classroom was empty now, the students gone home, the chairs neatly arranged in rows. On the walls hung photographs of the community center's first graduating class, kids who had completed a 12-week program on money management and goal setting. Their faces beamed with pride, their futures suddenly brighter than they had seemed before. Marcus thought about his own future, about all the things he still wanted to accomplish. Elevate was expanding internationally now, with offices in London, Tokyo, and Lagos. The company employed over 2,000 people and had helped millions of families build wealth. The 10% profit-sharing initiative had funded community centers in a dozen cities. But the numbers weren't what mattered most. What mattered was the stories. Mrs. Johnson, who had used Elevate to save enough money to buy a house. Marcus Williams, who had started his own business and hired 3 people from his neighborhood. The young woman who had sent a handwritten letter thanking Marcus for believing in her potential when no one else did. These were the victories that couldn't be measured in quarterly reports or stock prices. These were the victories that made everything worthwhile. There was a knock at the door. Marcus turned to find his grandmother standing there, leaning on her cane but refusing to sit down. "I'm so proud of you, baby," she said, her eyes glistening. "Your grandfather would be proud too. You've done everything he dreamed of, and more." Marcus crossed the room and hugged her gently. "I couldn't have done any of it without you, Grandma. You're the one who taught me what matters. I taught you how to clean your shoes and say please and thank you. The rest you figured out yourself." They laughed together, the sound filling the empty classroom with warmth. "Can I tell you something?" Eleanor said. "Something I've never told anyone?" "Of course. When you came home that day, 8 years ago, after that man treated you so badly, I was scared, not just angry, scared, because I knew that moment could break you. It could turn you bitter, make you hard, destroy everything soft and good inside you." Marcus listened, his throat tight. "But it didn't. Instead, you let it make you stronger. You let it make you more determined to prove that kindness isn't weakness, that success doesn't require cruelty. You became the man I always hoped you would be." She reached up and touched his face. "And that, baby, is your real legacy. Not the money or the company, but the choice you made to be good when you had every reason to be angry." Marcus couldn't speak. He simply held his grandmother, feeling her fragile strength, her unwavering love. After a while, she pulled back and straightened her dress. "Now come on. Your mother made her famous sweet potato pie, and if we don't get there soon, Tyler's going to eat it all." They walked out of the classroom together, grandmother and grandson, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the community center floor. Outside, The neighborhood was coming alive with the sounds of children playing, of families gathering, of life continuing its eternal cycle. Marcus paused at the entrance, looking back at the building that represented so much of his journey. He thought about the boy who had walked down Michigan Avenue with a worn backpack and carefully polished shoes. He thought about the man who had demanded that he clean his shoes, who had seen nothing of value in a black teenager with dreams. That man had been wrong. The whole system that had produced him, that had taught him to look down on people who didn't share his privilege, had been wrong. And Marcus had spent the last 8 years proving it, but the work wasn't finished. It would never be finished. There were still children growing up in neighborhoods where opportunity was a foreign concept, still families trapped in cycles of poverty that seemed impossible to escape, still systems designed to keep certain people down while lifting others up. Marcus couldn't fix all of it. No one person could. But he could keep trying. He could keep building. He could keep proving that a different way was possible. He thought about something Dr. Howard had told him during their first meeting all those years ago. The point is proving that the people who tried to keep me out were wrong. The point is creating opportunities for people who look like us, who come from where we come from. The point is changing the system from the inside. Marcus had done that. He was still doing it, and he would keep doing it until his last breath. Because that was his legacy. Not revenge, not vindication, but proof. Proof that a black kid from the South Side could change the world. Proof that the measure of a person wasn't the color of their skin or the size of their bank account, but the content of their character and the magnitude of their impact. Clean my shoes, boy. Richard Whitmore had said those words expecting to diminish, to demean, to demonstrate his power over someone he considered lesser. Instead, he had ignited a fire that would illuminate the path for generations to come. Marcus smiled, took his grandmother's arm, and walked out into the sunshine. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. 3 years after the community center opened, Marcus found himself in a place he had never expected to be. The funeral was small, intimate. Richard Whitmore had outlived most of his friends, and many of those who remained were too frail to travel. His children, estranged for decades due to his difficult personality, had not come, but Marcus was there. He stood in the back of the chapel, watching as the minister spoke about a life that had spanned 8 decades. The words were generic, the kind of eulogy given when the deceased's story was too complicated for simple summary. After the service, Marcus approached the casket. Richard Whitmore looked peaceful in death. The harshness finally softened from his features. The expensive suit he wore was immaculate, his shoes perfectly polished. "I didn't think you'd come," said a voice behind him. Marcus turned to find Daniel Ashworth, older now, his hair grey at the temples. "Neither did I," Marcus admitted. "But something told me I needed to be here. He talked about you, you know, in the end. He said you were the only person who ever gave him a second chance, the only one who saw that he could be more than what he had been." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Did he change? Really change?" "I think so. Those last 2 years, working at your community center, teaching those kids, I saw something different in him. A softness that hadn't been there before. He stopped caring about money, about status. He just wanted to help." Daniel paused. "He said once that you had saved his soul. I thought he was being dramatic, but now I'm not so sure." Marcus looked down at the man who had once represented everything he despised. The man who had humiliated him on a public sidewalk, who had dismissed him as worthless, who had embodied all the casual cruelty of a system designed to keep people down. That man was gone now. In his place was someone else entirely, someone who had spent his final years trying to undo the damage of a lifetime, someone who had learned, however late, that the measure of a person wasn't wealth or power, but compassion and humility. "He saved himself," Marcus said finally. "I just gave him the opportunity. What he did with it was his choice." After the funeral, Marcus drove to the community center. It was a Saturday, and the building was alive with activity. Children laughed in the computer lab, teenagers studied in the library, parents attended financial planning workshops in the main hall. In the corner of the lobby, there was a small plaque that Richard Whitmore had requested be installed before his death. It read, "To Marcus Thompson, who taught me that it's never too late to become the person you should have been." Marcus touched the plaque gently, feeling the weight of the words. Then he walked into the building, ready to continue the work. There was always more work to do. 10 years had passed since that autumn morning on Michigan Avenue. A decade of struggle and triumph, of setbacks and breakthroughs, of lessons learned and wisdom earned. Marcus Thompson stood at the podium of the Chicago Economic Forum, looking out at an audience of hundreds. CEOs, investors, politicians, and journalists had gathered to hear him speak about the future of inclusive capitalism. He thought about how far he had come. The boy with the worn backpack and carefully polished shoes was now a billionaire, his company valued at over $50 billion. Elevate had revolutionized personal finance, bringing wealth-building tools to over 100 million people worldwide. The profit-sharing initiative had funded schools, hospitals, and community centers on every continent. But none of that was what Marcus wanted to talk about today. He cleared his throat and began. 10 years ago, I was 17 years old, standing on a sidewalk in downtown Chicago. I was on my way to a job interview, nervous and hopeful, convinced that if I just worked hard enough, I could achieve my dreams. And then a man stepped out of a limousine and asked me to clean his shoes. The audience was silent, their attention riveted. He looked at me and saw nothing, a black kid from the South Side, not worth acknowledging as a fellow human being, just a convenient servant, a prop for his casual demonstration of power. When I refused, he had me blacklisted from the interview. My dream, shattered in an instant by someone who would forget me by lunchtime. Marcus paused, letting the words sink in. That moment could have destroyed me. It could have made me bitter, angry, consumed by revenge, and for a while I was. I spent years planning how I would make that man pay, how I would take everything he had and show him that he had underestimated me. But somewhere along the way, I realized something. Revenge is a trap. It chains you to the person who hurt you, makes you dependent on their downfall for your own sense of worth. And I refused to give that man power over my life. Instead, I chose a different path. I chose to build something that proved him wrong, not by destroying him, but by creating opportunities for millions of people like me. People who have been told they don't matter, that the system isn't for them, that they should accept their place and stop dreaming of more. Marcus looked out at the audience, meeting their eyes one by one. Today, I'm not going to talk about profit margins or market share or technological innovation. I'm going to talk about what really matters, about the kind of leaders we want to be and the kind of world we want to create. There's a young woman in Lagos who used Elevate to save enough money to attend university. She's studying engineering now, the first person in her family to pursue higher education. There's a single father in Detroit who learned financial literacy at one of our community centers, and now he's teaching his children the lessons he never received. There's a grandmother in Chicago who thought she would never own anything, but now she has a retirement account and a college fund for her grandchildren. These are the stories that matter, not the valuations, not the headlines, not the accolades. The individual lives changed, the futures made possible, the dreams given room to breathe. The man who asked me to clean his shoes passed away 3 years ago. In his final years, he worked at one of our community centers, teaching financial literacy to kids from neighborhoods he had never visited before. He told me once that I had given him a second chance to become the person he should have been. I didn't save him, he saved himself. But I gave him the opportunity because I believe that people can change, that systems can change, that the world can be better than it is. Marcus straightened his shoulders, his voice growing stronger. So I challenge each of you today. What will you build? What lives will you change? What opportunities will you create for people who have been told they don't deserve them? The measure of our success is not how much wealth we accumulate, but how many people we lift up along the way. It's not about winning against others, but about helping everyone win. It's not about proving that we're better than anyone, but about proving that everyone deserves the chance to be their best. That's the legacy I want to leave. That's the world I want to create. And I invite all of you to join me in building it. The applause started slowly, then built to a thundering crescendo. People rose to their feet, moved by words that spoke to something deeper than business or economics. Marcus stepped back from the podium, feeling the weight of the moment. He thought about his grandmother, who had passed away 2 years earlier, who had lived just long enough to see her grandson address world leaders at the United Nations. He thought about his mother, sitting in the front row with tears streaming down her face. He thought about Tyler, who had become his partner and closest confidant. He thought about Dr. Howard, who had retired but still called every week to check on him. He thought about Richard Whitmore, about their improbable journey from contempt to collaboration, to something that might have been redemption. And he thought about the boy on the sidewalk, the one who had been dismissed as nothing, who had transformed that pain into purpose. That boy was still inside him, would always be inside him, a reminder of where he had come from and why he could never forget the people still struggling to find their way. Marcus Thompson smiled, took a deep breath, and walked off the stage to continue the work. There was always more work to do. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier to Marcus's office on the 42nd floor of the Elevate Tower. It was handwritten on expensive stationery, the kind that had become rare in the digital age. Marcus, the letter began. If you're reading this, I've been gone for 3 years. I arranged for this letter to be delivered on the anniversary of my death because I wanted to give you time. Time to forget my worst moments. Time to remember only the good, if there was any good to remember. I'm not writing to apologize again. I apologized enough when I was alive, and words on paper can't change what I did. I'm writing because I need you to know something that I never had the courage to say in person. You saved my life. Not in the physical sense. By the time we met again, I was already dying, though I didn't know it yet. But you saved something more important than my body. You saved whatever was left of my soul. For 50 years, I lived as if other people existed only to serve me. I inherited that belief from my father, who inherited it from his father, and I never questioned it. I thought my wealth and my name made me special, made me worthy, made me better than the people I stepped on to maintain my position, and then you came along. A 17-year-old kid who refused to clean my shoes, who stood on that sidewalk and looked me in the eye and declared his own worth. In that moment, I saw something that terrified me. I saw the future. I saw a world where people like me would no longer be able to dismiss people like you. And instead of welcoming that future, I tried to destroy you. I failed, obviously. What I didn't expect was that you would turn my cruelty into fuel. That you would build an empire on the foundation of my contempt. That you would become everything I had told you that you couldn't be. But what truly astonished me was what happened after. When my world collapsed, when everything I had built turned to dust, you reached out, Not to gloat, not to punish, but to offer me a chance to make amends. I didn't deserve that chance. We both know it. But you gave it to me anyway because you understood something I had never grasped. That mercy is not weakness, that forgiveness is not surrender, that the measure of a person is not how they treat those above them, but how they treat those they could destroy with impunity. The last 2 years of my life were the best years, teaching those kids, watching their eyes light up when they understood concepts that had been kept from them, seeing them realize that the world didn't have to keep them down. That was worth more than all the money I ever made. I want you to know that I died at peace, not because I deserved peace, but because you showed me that it was possible, that change was possible, that even the worst of us can find redemption if someone is generous enough to offer it. Thank you, Marcus, for seeing the person I could be, even when I couldn't see it myself. Richard Whitmore III. Marcus read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in his desk drawer next to a photograph of his grandmother and a copy of the 5-year plan he had written in her basement all those years ago. He thought about legacy, about the stories we tell ourselves and the stories that others will tell about us, about the difference between the person we are and the person we have the potential to become. Richard Whitmore had been a villain in his story, the antagonist who set the plot in motion. But stories are more complicated than heroes and villains. People are more complicated than the roles we assign them. In the end, Richard Whitmore had become something unexpected, not a hero exactly, but not merely a villain either, something in between, something human. And maybe that was enough. Marcus looked out the window at the Chicago skyline, at the city that had shaped him and challenged him and ultimately made him who he was. The lake stretched to the horizon, reflecting the late afternoon sun. Somewhere down there, in neighborhoods most of his fellow executives would never visit, children were learning lessons that would change their lives. Families were building wealth that would last for generations. Dreams were taking shape, fragile and precious, waiting for the chance to bloom. That was his real legacy, not the buildings or the billions. The lives changed, the futures made possible, the proof that a better world was within reach if only we had the courage to build it. Marcus Thompson smiled, picked up his phone, and called his mother. "Hey, Mom, I was thinking about coming over for dinner tonight. Is that sweet potato pie still available?" "Baby, for you, there's always pie. Bring Tyler. And don't you dare be late. I wouldn't dream of it." He hung up, gathered his things, and headed for the elevator. The work would still be here tomorrow. But family, the people who had believed in him when believing was hard, the ones who had shaped him into the man he had become, they were waiting. Some things were more important than work. The elevator doors opened, and Marcus Thompson stepped inside, ready to go home. The sun was setting over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. On the sidewalk outside the Elevate Tower, a young woman in a worn coat stood looking up at the building, a job interview scheduled for tomorrow, nerves jangling in her stomach. She wondered if she had what it took, if someone like her, from where she came from, could ever belong in a place like this. Inside, Marcus Thompson pressed the button for the lobby, thinking about dinner with his mother and the work waiting for tomorrow. He didn't know that a young woman was standing outside, carrying the same hopes and fears he had carried years ago. But if he had known, he would have smiled, because the story was continuing, new chapters were beginning. And somewhere out there, another kid was standing on a sidewalk, refusing to be diminished, refusing to accept that their worth was determined by the size of their bank account or the color of their skin. That was the real victory, not the wealth or the fame or the power. The knowledge that the fire he had lit was spreading, that others were picking up torches and carrying them forward, that the world was changing slowly but surely, one life at a time. "Clean my shoes, boy." The words echoed in Marcus's memory, not with pain anymore, but with something like gratitude. because without that moment of cruelty, he might never have become who he was meant to be. The wound had become a gift. The obstacle had become the way. And now, 10 years later, the boy who had refused to kneel was standing taller than anyone had ever imagined possible. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. Marcus stepped out into the evening light. Tomorrow, he would return. Tomorrow, there would be meetings and decisions and challenges to overcome. But tonight, there was family. There was love. There was the simple joy of being alive and being grateful for it. Marcus Thompson walked out of the building that bore his company's name, smiled at the security guard, and headed for his car. The city glittered around him, full of stories waiting to be written. His own story was far from over. But the chapters already written, the journey from that sidewalk to this moment, had taught him everything he needed to know. Success wasn't about defeating your enemies. It was about becoming the person you were meant to be. And Marcus Thompson, the boy who had refused to clean a stranger's shoes, had become exactly that. The morning sun rose over Chicago, as it always did, indifferent to the dramas playing out beneath it. But for those paying attention, for those who knew where to look, the light seemed just a little brighter today. A new day was beginning, and somewhere in the city, in community centers and schools and homes, the seeds Marcus had planted were continuing to grow. That was his legacy. That was his victory. That was enough. The quarterly meeting at Elevate headquarters had just ended when Marcus received an unexpected visitor. His assistant knocked on the door, her expression curious. "Mr. Thompson, there's a young man here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. His name is Jerome Washington." Marcus frowned. The name wasn't familiar. "Did he say what it's about?" "He said you spoke at his high school 3 years ago. He says you changed his life, and he wanted to thank you in person." Something stirred in Marcus's memory. 3 years ago, he had visited dozens of schools, given countless speeches. But something about this situation felt different. Send him in. Jerome Washington was tall and thin, with intelligent eyes and a nervous energy that reminded Marcus of himself at that age. He wore a suit that was clearly borrowed or rented, slightly too large in the shoulders, but his shoes were immaculate, carefully polished. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry to just show up like this," Jerome said, his voice wavering slightly. "I know you're busy, but I had to tell you something." "Have a seat, Jerome, and call me Marcus." Jerome sat, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. 3 years ago, you came to Dunbar High School on the South Side. You talked about your story, about how you started with nothing and built Elevate. But that's not what changed my life. What did? You told us about the shoes, about the man who asked you to clean his shoes, and how you refused. You said that moment taught you that your worth wasn't determined by how others saw you, but by how you saw yourself. Jerome's voice grew stronger. I was 15 years old. My father had just been sent to prison. My mother was working 3 jobs. I was failing most of my classes because I figured, what was the point? The world had already decided what I was going to be. Marcus listened, his chest tightening. But when I heard your story, something clicked. I realized I had a choice. I could let the world define me, or I could define myself. So I started working harder than I'd ever worked at anything. I brought my grades up, I applied to college, and last month I got accepted to the University of Chicago on a full scholarship. Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. Jerome, that's incredible. I wanted you to know that your story mattered, not just the success part, the struggle, the moments when everything seemed impossible. That's what gave me hope. That's what showed me that someone who looked like me, who came from where I came from, could achieve things the world said were impossible. They talked for an hour. Jerome told Marcus about his plans to study computer science, about his dream of creating technology that would help incarcerated people maintain relationships with their families. Marcus listened, offered advice, and eventually made a decision. "Jerome, I'd like to offer you an internship at Elevate this summer, paid, of course. You'll work directly with our technology team, and I'll personally mentor you." Jerome's eyes went wide. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say yes, and then work harder than you've ever worked in your life. Because that's what it takes. Not luck, not connections, not the right last name. Hard work and the refusal to accept what others say you're worth." "Yes," Jerome said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, sir, I will." After Jerome left, Marcus sat alone in his office, thinking about the strange circles of life. 20 years ago, he had been that young man, desperate for someone to believe in him. Now, he had the opportunity to be that person for others. His phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. "Dinner tonight? Sarah's making her famous lasagna, and the kids want to see Uncle Marcus." Marcus smiled. Tyler had married 5 years ago to a woman named Sarah who worked as a public defender. They had 2 children now, and Marcus was their godfather. "I'll be there. Tell the kids I'm bringing ice cream." He gathered his things and headed for the door. But before he left, he paused at the window, looking out at the city he loved. 20 years. 20 years since that morning on Michigan Avenue. 20 years since a single act of cruelty had set him on a path he never could have imagined. He thought about all the people who had helped him along the way. His grandmother, who had taught him that integrity was the only thing a man truly owned. His mother, who had worked herself to exhaustion so that he could have opportunities she never had. Dr. Howard, who had seen potential in him when others saw nothing. Tyler, who had become a brother in every way that mattered. And yes, even Richard Whitmore, who had shown him the kind of man he refused to become. They had all played their parts in his story. And now he was playing his part in the stories of others. That was how it worked. That was how change happened, not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through the quiet, persistent work of lifting others up, of sharing what you had learned, of proving that a better way was possible. Marcus took a deep breath, turned off the lights, and left his office. The work would continue tomorrow. Tonight, there was family waiting. The drive to Tyler's house took him through neighborhoods he had known his entire life, past the corner store where he had bought candy as a child, past the community center where he had played basketball during the summers, past the church where his grandmother had sung in the choir every Sunday for 40 years. These streets had shaped him, for better and worse. They had shown him the consequences of poverty, of systemic neglect, of being forgotten by a society that claimed to care about everyone. But they had also shown him the strength of community, the power of love, the resilience of people who refused to give up. He pulled into Tyler's driveway just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The house was modest by the standards of someone with Tyler's wealth, a comfortable 3-bedroom in a good school district. Tyler had never been interested in flashy displays of success. "Uncle Marcus!" 2 small bodies launched themselves at him as he walked through the door. Maya, 7 years old, with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. David, 5, named after Tyler's father, a whirlwind of energy and endless questions. Marcus scooped them both up, one in each arm, eliciting squeals of delight. "Did you bring ice cream?" Maya demanded. "Have I ever let you down?" Tyler appeared in the hallway, grinning. "You're spoiling them." "That's literally my job as a godfather. It's in the contract." Sarah emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She hugged Marcus warmly. "Thank you for coming. These 2 have been asking about you all week." They sat down to dinner, the conversation flowing easily. Marcus listened as Maya talked about her science project, as David described his best friend's new puppy in exhaustive detail, as Tyler and Sarah exchanged the comfortable banter of a happy marriage. This was what success looked like, Marcus thought. Not the buildings or the billions. This, family, connection, love. After dinner, while Sarah put the kids to bed, Marcus and Tyler sat on the back porch, watching the stars emerge. "You ever think about what might have happened?" Tyler asked. "If things had gone differently. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. What do you think?" Marcus considered the question. "I think about the version of me that gave up, that let Whitmore's cruelty break him, that accepted the limits others placed on him. Sometimes I wonder if that version exists somewhere, in some parallel universe, still cleaning toilets and wondering why the world is so unfair. But you didn't give up." "No, I got lucky. I had my grandmother, my mother, you, Dr. Howard. I had people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Not everyone has that. That's why you do what you do, isn't it? The community centers, the mentorship programs, the scholarships. You're trying to give other people what you had. I'm trying, but it's never enough. For every Jerome Washington who makes it through, there are 100 others who don't. Who fall through the cracks, who never get a second chance, who never meet the right person at the right time." Tyler was quiet for a moment. "You can't save everyone, Marcus." "I know, but I can't stop trying." They sat in comfortable silence, two men who had started as reluctant roommates and become brothers. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of Tyler's garden, the distant sound of traffic. "Sarah wants me to run for city council," Tyler said finally. Marcus turned to look at him. "Seriously? She thinks I could make a difference, use my connections, my resources to actually change policy instead of just working around it. And what do you think?" Tyler was quiet for a long moment. "I think she might be right. I've spent 15 years in venture capital, funding companies that make the world a little bit better, but maybe it's time to do something more direct. You'd have my full support, whatever you need." "I know. That's why I wanted to tell you first." Tyler smiled. "Besides, you're going to need a friend in city government when you finally decide to build that affordable housing complex you've been talking about." Marcus laughed. "You know me too well. 20 years of friendship will do that." They clinked their glasses together, a silent toast to the years behind them and the years still to come. "Whatever happens," Marcus said, "I'm glad we're doing this together." "Me too, man. Me too." The night deepened around them, the stars wheeling slowly overhead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles, new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight, there was this: friendship, gratitude, the simple joy of being alive and being connected. Marcus Thompson closed his eyes, breathed in the cool night air, and felt at peace. The story continued to unfold day by day, one life at a time. And as long as there was work to be done, as long as there were people who needed help, as long as the system remained imperfect and the world remained unfair, Marcus would keep working. Not for revenge, not for validation, not for the approval of people who had once dismissed him. For the kids who reminded him of himself, for the families who deserved a chance, for the future that was still being written, one choice at a time. That was the mission. That was the meaning. That was the only legacy worth leaving, and Marcus Thompson, the boy who had refused to clean a stranger's shoes, would carry that torch until his dying breath. The morning sun rose over Chicago as it always did, and the work continued.